Patrick stares intensely at Kettle, his voice breaking the silence of the night. He asks if Kettle truly accepted this request simply to fulfill the terms of a contract. Kettle does not answer immediately. He remains silent for a long moment, looking downward as the light from the campfire flickers across his face. The atmosphere is heavy with a quiet tension. Eventually, Kettle's eyes shift, acknowledging the question. Kettle admits that the contract is part of it. He rests his hand on his knee, his posture relaxed despite the weight of the conversation. He continues, stating that more than anything else, this situation has become an incredibly interesting story. A wide, confident smile spreads across his face as he looks up at Patrick. He suggests that it would be a true loss to miss out on a story as entertaining as this one. Patrick is momentarily stunned. He stares at the barbarian, unable to comprehend the logic behind his words. In his mind, he repeats the words, wondering what kind of person would risk everything just for the sake of interest. He watches Kettle closely, his eyes narrowing as he processes this revelation. The situation that seemed so dire to others is nothing more than a source of amusement for the man sitting across from him. Patrick's gaze lingers on Kettle. He finds it fascinating that such a unique existence could live among others, replacing roles so seamlessly that no one notices. He begins to wonder if this strange way of thinking is a common trait among the barbarians of the White Snow Field. As he looks at Kettle's powerful frame, a darker thought crosses Patrick's mind. Deep within, the Tower Master Licker's curiosity takes hold. He feels a sudden, chilling desire to study Kettle's body. He imagines tearing him apart, piece by piece, to understand the fundamental principles that make him so strong and so different. To him, Kettle is no longer just a companion or a mercenary, but a specimen of immense value. The scene shifts to the following day as the group travels through a lush, green forest. Kettle leads the way, walking with a steady and rhythmic pace. Patrick follows closely behind him, his hands still bound by thick ropes as he maintains his disguise as a captured mercenary. Behind them, Aaron and Eileen follow, their expressions weary as they navigate the dirt path. The sound of their footsteps echoes through the quiet woods. Patrick keeps his eyes fixed on Kettle's back. He observes how the barbarian only seems to move according to his own personal interests. Patrick acknowledges that he has a mountain of questions he wants to ask, a burning need to uncover the truth behind Kettle's nature. However, he tells himself to endure for now. He must maintain his role as an ordinary citizen who simply admires Kettle's strength. He walks in silence, biding his time. Suddenly, a sharp whistling sound cuts through the air. An arrow flies toward the group with incredible speed. Without a hint of panic, Kettle reacts. He senses the incoming projectile and moves with precision. The arrow is intercepted, stopping abruptly as Kettle catches it mid-air or deflects its path. Aaron and Eileen gasp, their eyes wide with shock at the sudden ambush. Kettle looks at the arrow in his hand, his expression calm. He muses to himself, wondering if his opponents have resorted to guerrilla warfare this time. A smirk plays on his lips. He admits that the strategy isn't bad, but it isn't the correct answer to stopping him. From the surrounding trees, several knights in full silver armor and green capes descend. They move with practiced coordination, surrounding Kettle from all sides. They leap from the heights, their weapons ready as they close in on their target. Kettle remains standing in the center of the path, the arrow still held firmly in his gloved hand. He does not draw his axe, instead, he prepares to meet them with his bare hands. As the first knight reaches him, Kettle strikes. The force of his blow is devastating. With a single, powerful movement, he hits the knight squarely in the chest. The sound of metal shattering fills the forest. The knight's thick breastplate cracks and caves in under the pressure of Kettle's fist. The impact is so great that the knight is sent flying backward, blood spraying from his mouth behind his visor. The other knights watch in horror as their comrade is neutralized in an instant. They realize the sheer gap in power between them and the barbarian. Fear takes over their ranks. One of them cries out in desperation, calling Kettle a monster. Realizing they stand no chance in a direct confrontation, they immediately call for a retreat. The knights scramble away, fleeing into the dense foliage and leaving their fallen comrade and a discarded sword behind. Kettle watches them go, his presence alone enough to turn the tide of the skirmish without him ever breaking a sweat. Kettle stands calmly amidst the aftermath of the brief skirmish. Eileen watches him, her expression filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. She speaks up, telling him that his strength is truly incredible, noting that the knights he just repelled were by no means weak opponents. Kettle looks at her with a neutral expression, his response short and casual. He simply asks if that was the case, appearing completely unfazed by the feat he just performed. Eileen continues to stare at him, her blue eyes searching his face for an answer to a question weighing on her mind. She eventually asks why he chose to let the knights live. She wonders aloud if he did so out of consideration for her and Aaron, perhaps wanting to spare them from witnessing more violence. Kettle's gaze remains steady as he answers her. He tells her bluntly that his decision had nothing to do with them. Eileen's expression shifts to one of slight embarrassment and awkwardness, realizing she had misread his intentions. Kettle's attention shifts away from the conversation. His eyes fixate on the swords and pieces of equipment scattered on the ground. He looks intensely at the discarded metal, his brow furrowing slightly. He mutters that there is something he needs to check. Before he can investigate further, the sound of shouting erupts from the forest once again. A group of knights, identical in appearance to the ones who just fled, emerge from the foliage. They brandish their swords, their voices filled with anger as they demand that the barbarian release the princess. They hurl insults at Kettle, calling him a darn barbarian, and ordering him to let her go immediately. Kettle does not move to defend himself right away. He hums softly in thought, his eyes narrowed as he observes the approaching soldiers. As the lead knight closes in, Kettle moves with a speed that defies his massive size. He reaches out and seizes the knight by the throat, his gloved hand closing tightly around the man's neck. He lifts the fully armored knight off the ground with a single arm, holding him suspended in the air. The knight gasps for breath, his hands clawing desperately at Kettle's unwavering grip. While the knight struggles, Kettle is not looking at the man's face. Instead, his gaze is focused on the knight's breastplate. He examines the metal closely, noticing specific scratches and dents on the surface. In his mind, he realizes the truth. This is the exact same suit of armor he had smashed into pieces only a few hours prior. He recognizes the patterns of the damage perfectly. A small, cold smile touches his lips as he remarks that this situation has become very interesting. He releases his grip, letting the knight fall heavily to the dirt path. The soldier coughs and sputters, quickly scrambling to his feet to retreat once more with his companions. Eileen, watching the exchange from a short distance away, is visibly confused. She asks Kettle what he meant by his observation. Kettle turns to her and explains the anomaly. He points out that the knights aren't simply getting new supplies. Rather, the armor and swords that were clearly broken and ruined are somehow becoming whole again. He turns his head to Aaron and asks if such a thing is possible through the use of magic. Aaron looks grave as he considers the question. He explains that while it is technically possible to repair equipment with magic, it would require a significant amount of specialized equipment and, at the very least, a full day's time to complete. Kettle processes this information and points out the flaw in that logic. He broke that specific set of armor only 5 hours ago, meaning there hasn't been nearly enough time for a magical repair to take place. Kettle begins to piece together the mechanics of the forest they are in. He explains his theory, noting that once he drives the knights away and they reach a certain distance, their presence and tracks completely vanish from his senses. Then, after a short period, they reappear as if nothing had happened to them. He compares the phenomenon to a reset, where the world or the entities within it revert to a previous state. He looks back toward the path where the knights usually emerge, his silver eyes sharp. He states that there is only one final thing left for him to confirm. As if on cue, the knights reappear once more, leveling their weapons and repeating their scripted demands for the princess's release. Kettle stares at them, his expression hardening. The cycle is repeating exactly as it did before. He calls out Eileen's name. She looks at him, sensing the change in the atmosphere, and gives a firm, somber nod of understanding. Kettle's hand moves slowly and deliberately toward the handle of the large axe strapped to his back. He grips the weapon, ready to test the limits of the reset. Kettle stands over the fallen knight, the silence of the forest returning as the other soldiers vanish once more into the greenery. Fresh blood drips steadily from the heavy blade of his axe, soaking into the dirt path. He looks down at the body with a cold, analytical gaze. In his mind, he reflects on the act he just committed. He admits to himself that because these beings possess human forms, there is a lingering sense of repulsion, a slight distaste for the slaughter. However, he remains resolute. To him, this act was a necessity. It was the only way to confirm the truth of the phenomenon he had observed. He tells himself that with this, everything has finally become clear. Aaron and Eileen stand several paces back, their faces pale as they stare at the unmoving knight. Eileen is particularly distressed, her hands trembling as she looks at the man Kettle has just slain. She is no longer just seeing a nameless enemy, she is seeing a face she recognizes. As night falls over the forest, the group sets up a small camp. A fire crackles within a ring of stones, casting long, dancing shadows against the trees and the tent. Kettle sits on a log, focused on a large pot hanging over the flames. He stirs the soup slowly, the steam rising into the cool night air. Eileen sits across from him, her expression somber as she stares into the darkness beyond the firelight. She speaks in a hushed tone, confirming that the man Kettle killed was definitely dead. She explains that she actually knew him. He was a knight she used to see occasionally, passing by and watching him as he practiced his swordsmanship. The weight of the situation settles heavily on her. She realizes that while the man may look and sound the same, he is no longer the person she once knew. Seeing someone familiar die right before her eyes, even in this twisted state, is a burden she struggles to process. Kettle continues to stir the pot, his movements steady and rhythmic. He recalls something Aaron had mentioned before, a story about a child named Kathy. Aaron had noted that Kathy didn't seem to feel the primal fear of death, even when a massive statue was on the verge of crushing her. Kettle begins to connect the pieces. He realizes that the reason for this lack of fear is simple: these are beings that do not truly die. They are caught in a cycle, an endless loop where death is merely a temporary state before they are reset once more. Kettle pours a bowl of the hot soup and hands it to Eileen. His voice is calm as he asks her if she has any idea what those nights truly are. He wants to know if there is anything in her knowledge that can explain their presence and their strange, undying nature. Eileen takes the bowl, holding it with both hands as if seeking warmth from the ceramic. She looks down at her own reflection in the shimmering liquid, her eyes filled with uncertainty. She tells him that she doesn't know for certain. She admits that what she has witnessed defies the natural order. To her, anything that can return from the grip of death so easily cannot be considered a living thing. She pauses, her voice trembling slightly as she offers the only explanation she can find. She suggests that the only possibility is that these are entities from the demonic realm. To her, this forest and its recurring guardians are not part of the world she understands, but a manifestation of something far more malevolent and structured. Kettle listens in silence, his silver eyes reflecting the glowing embers of the fire. He stares into the flames, absorbing the weight of her words as he prepares for whatever the next reset might bring.